Hello everybody, it is Rachel and I am here with how to stitch block 1-1. And this was a huge undertaking. Actually a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be. So I have one half already stitched all together. I did find with the smaller blocks, and we'll see if this holds true for the bigger one, that stitching the entire half together first, so you have all these parts and pieces, all this extra stuff, was easier to do it on each half and then stitch them in the middle together. And I think that's going to hold true, but we'll see. Like I said, watch my videos all the way before you make a decision on how you want to do it. But this is how I did it for now. So we stitched our middle star, and rather than stitching the other half of the star, I just kept going around. So we did our dots. I did these pieces individually, I'll show you, and then we tacked on the top pieces. So we have half done. So we'll finish the other half completely and then stitch them together is how this is going to work. So obviously I have not finished the other half. I kept it in its pieces so that I could show you how I am putting it together. So the first thing I started with were these stars. And you can see I have one without the stripes on it. So there are, I believe, 10 of these that you're going to sew together. So I have one that is partially sewn. Let's move some stuff out of the way so that you can see how this works. So I have one that's partially sewn. There are not, so generally with the stars you want to sew half of it and then sew up the middle. With these there's only 5 pieces, so there's really no half. So I've just been placing one diamond into another, and that's really the basics of it. So I have my thread ready to go here. So what we're going to do is just line up my diamond and just keep stitching here. So what I try to do is I try to go down and then up so I can preserve as much thread as I want. So if I start here, I would stitch it, tie a knot, come down, stitch it, tie a knot at the end. Do not tie a knot at the beginning of the next one, but come up and then tie a knot at the end and cut. So you're doing a V. So you can keep your thread without cutting it for as much as you can. And so right now I'm at the point where I stitched down one, and now I'm gonna go up the other V, and then I'll just have one line left to stitch after that. So that's where we're at. So you really want to make sure you line up everything nice and good. The good thing about these is they're all the same shape, so you should be able to feel the edges, rub them together so that you can see that, you know, they're all lined up the same way. We put down our magnets so nothing moves. I like to use 2 because I'm using these smaller magnets. And I stitch from right to left. So that's how I'm going to hold this. And we're just going to go ahead and stitch that line. So I'll do that in fast motion for you so that you can see how that works. Alright, so once you stitch that all together, so again we do the V, a V, and then one line, you have your star, and you get this nice repeating pattern. So your next step is going to be setting in your stripes. And this is a little bit harder. My suggestion for doing these is, again, to just eyeball lining up this middle, and I actually use a Sew Tite to, or sorry, not Sew Tite, a clip to keep that in place. And then I will do my 2 clips to really hold it all in place. So the key here is to just make sure everything is really nice and rock solid and exactly where you want it. So I will start at the corner here, and again just kind of eyeballing, making sure that lines up, and stitch down to the middle. What I will do is I will actually stitch from the corner to the middle and then flip it open. So if I'm not completely sure of my placement, I'll flip it open just to see if I'm way off. I'd rather just unstitch half than get all the way to the end and have to unstitch it again. So I will do that quite often. I don't necessarily do it with every single one. I'm not trying to make this whole process longer, but it does help if you're not 100% sure. So we'll show that. I will do that on this one just to kind of show you how that works. So we'll go ahead and sew this in fast motion, but again, we'll do this. And I do use my darker thread. So I'm going to use my fuchsia thread to match that. I mean, you have light and dark, so you can go either way. I like to use the dark if I have dark, so that's what I'm going to use. And again, we're going to knot at the beginning, stitch halfway, flip it open, make sure it kind of lines up. If it does, we'll flip it closed, finish, and knot at the end. So we'll do that in fast motion for you and show you what that looks like. Okay, so we stitched on this side, so let's take this off. I did open it up. Hopefully you could see that in the fast motion to make sure it looked okay, but it's really nicely lined up. And so what we'll do is we will go ahead and continue the other way. Now when you're doing these, don't be afraid to fold your papers. You can even undo a little tab here just to make it easier to fold the paper. You want everything to line up really nice, so don't let anything get in your way of that. So we're going to fold the paper and then make sure this all lines up. So we want our end to be lined up, we want our middle to be lined up, and we're going to go ahead and magnetize that so it does not move. And my thread got stuck in the middle, but that's fine. There we go. And so then we'll keep going this direction to the end. And the nice thing about this is because we're going back and forth, I can keep my thread going. So what I do is I don't tie a knot at the beginning if my thread is continuing, but I do tie a knot at the end so that if I have to unsew on the next line, the knot is there and is not affected if I have to unsew. So we'll go to the end of this, then we'll set in a new one, keep going, and if I have to cut my thread, we'll start a new thread, but we're gonna keep going. And so each of these is going to get 4 total pieces. So you have 10 stars and 40 stripe fabrics. And so each side will get 4. You're going to leave one side open because they're going to nest into each other and create the visual of having more of them by having one open, if that makes sense. So that's how you want to do it. You want to put 4 on each star, and then once you're ready to attach it to the whole thing, then you'll nest each star into each other. So we'll just keep sewing and I'll show you the next step in just a second. Okay, so this is what it looks like once you have, let me see. so once you have everything attached, this is what each one is going to look like. So you're going to have 10 stars that look exactly like this with 4 stripes around the edges and then 1 not done. Because what's going to happen is these are going to nest into each other, and so this will become the piece that is missing from the star, and that will go all the way around. So that's how that's going to work. Do it like that so that they're the same in the same spot. Okay, so those are all set. So that is the next step. So the next step, let's work on the middle. So again, the way to do this is 5 at a time. So it's a 10-point star. You're going to do 5 at a time, and then we're going to add everything on to this so that we have the big piece ultimately once we're done. So I wanted to show how to stitch this together. So we are trying to create a pattern in the bottom here so that these little rosettes line up and create a nice little rosette ultimately in the bottom. So you want to pay attention to this as you are stitching, and that's what I want to show. So I have 2 pieces left to do. Again, I like to do a V. So for these ones I did down and then up with the same thread. So not at the beginning, not at the end, do not at the second beginning, and then not at the end. And we're going to do the same exact thing here. But what we're going to pay attention to this time is lining up these roses. So if you can see that right on the edge, you have a nice solid black line. You also have the roses. You want to make sure those are lined up. So if I had it like this, it is very obviously not lined up. That is not going to create a nice rosette. So I don't want to pay attention to the ends. I don't want to pay attention to that. We can adjust that. I cannot adjust the pattern itself. So that's what I want. When I want to make sure a pattern really lines up and creates a dynamic pattern all the way around, I want to focus solely on that pattern. So that is all lined up. My roses are lined up here. The black is lined up here. All of that is lined up. I'm going to clip it so it doesn't move. And then I'm going to do a magnet. And if you can kind of see, my ends are a little bit not lined up. So this end is a little bit lower than this one, but that's not a big deal because all I need to do is curve my piece when I'm sewing, and that will cause the lower end to meet up with the higher end. And so as I'm sewing, I just want to hold that curve. I can hold it with my hand like this and sew it like that, and that will line those up perfectly. Because the most important thing is that I get that visual lined up. Otherwise, that's going to be really obvious in the end that those did not line up. So that's what we're going to do. So now that I have that clipped, we just want to put our magnets on. So that this does not shift too much on me. And again, as I'm stitching, because this is a little bit lower, I'm going to have a little bit of a curve. And same thing once I get to the end here, if I need to, I can have a little bit of a curve to make it all work. And so we're going to go ahead and start at the top here and work our way down so that we can stitch in the next one by stitching up. And so that will be our next step. As far as more matching threads, this obviously does not have one color. It's all different colors. So I think I just went with a light pink. It looks like, yep, I can tell by the tail. So we just went with a light pink to just stitch all the way down. It's the most neutral of colors and will work with all of these vibrant colors because they are all very different. So that's what we're gonna do. So we'll do light pink all the way down, use that for the way up, make sure everything's lined up, and go from there. Okay, so we got the first one on. Let's see how we did lining up that pattern. And it looks really good. So you can see focusing on lining up the pattern is really what you want to do. And you can also see here, one of my corners is still a little low even with the curving, but it's not going to be a big deal. When I set this in, it'll be fine. So don't stress out about that at all. Honestly, lining up your pattern should be #1 priority unless there's like a huge gap. Even with a huge gap, you can fix it. But #1 priority should be lining up the pattern that you're trying to create. So the next one we're gonna set in here. So again, I'll zoom in again, sorry. So again, we wanna look for those hard lines on the pattern. This one's a little tougher because the dog is dark to see it, but you can see a little bit of the gold. You can definitely see the rose. So you can see I have that nicely lined up right there. I'm not worrying about my ends at all at this moment. I'll worry about them as I sew, but we do want it to be nice and straight. And that is exactly where we're gonna put our clip so it does not move on us. Ooh, this one's got a big gap. So this one we're gonna really show our skill here on how we incorporate this. So we do have a big gap here, but I'm gonna try and make it work. So again, probably what I'll do, actually, let me get a clip. And I showed this when I was doing Queen of Diamonds. You can definitely ease these in. This is a little bit different than working with a machine sewn quilt. So your paper pieces are your block. So you can manipulate the fabric themselves as long as you're not manipulating the paper underneath. It'll all work out. So you can see here, if I clip this so the corners are the same, I have a huge gap. It's really not a big deal. I'm just going to split that difference so I get 2 little gaps. I gotta find more clips. Okay, I found another clip. All right, so we're gonna split this difference and I'm gonna clip. Oops. So make sure you're clipping so that the difference is split. And again, curving it is going to, you can see when it's straight, I can see those gaps. If I curve it, those gaps go away. So I just really want to preserve where my pattern is lining up. So what I'm going to do is hold this like this as I stitch. I want to put some magnets in, so I'm trying to really hold this, and I'm going to stitch. Actually, I'm going up. You know what? I think I'm going to redo my thread. So normally I have my thread here. Because I'm at the bottom, I would go up, but because I have such a big curve to incorporate, I think I'm going to start a new thread, and I'm just going to stitch down to the bottom to make sure this is all right. So again, just really make sure your pattern is lined up the way you want it. So of course I unclip that so it came undone. You can always ease in. That is the easiest thing to do. Just make sure that's nice and lined up, and then we'll ease in the rest. So I'll fold. So take your time, don't worry about it. Just try your best here, but it is so easy to ease things in, and I would prefer to do that and have my pattern nice and lined up than line up my edges and my pattern doesn't line up. So we're going to do this, and actually I'm going to move this clip because that's where I'm going to start sewing. We're going to move this down to here. So again, we're trying to just make sure everything is nicely clipped, nothing's going to move on you. I'm going to start a new thread, and I'm going to go down, and I'm going to stop at this clip. I'm not going to move this clip until I'm sewn all the way down to the edge of it, because this is where my pattern starts. So we'll go ahead and do that in fast motion, and I'll show you what it looks like once we get to this point. Okay, so I have stitched all the way down, and you can see there's definitely a curve in here because of the way it eased in, but that's totally fine. It's gonna, once I take these papers out, you won't even notice that I did that, but you will notice if my pattern doesn't match up. So that's why it's important to do that. So I double stitched right next to this so that make sure that my threads don't come loose or anything. So I just took 2 stitches in a row. I didn't knot or anything. So now I can take this off. And we're still pretty well lined up, maybe just a smidgen more we need, just a smidgen, but I think we're pretty darn close. So I'm gonna move my clip down again, and I'm gonna keep going. And so my ends actually don't look too bad, but just make sure you're keeping an eye on those ends because you also don't want those to be way off. So I might have to go ease the other way for the ends, but this is actually looking pretty darn well lined up. So I'm gonna go ahead and stitch to the middle here and then pay real good attention to my ends here and then show you the final result. All right, so we have sewn that in. You can see, again, it has a little bit of a curve, but once this all flattens out and we take the papers out, it's not gonna be a big deal. So let's open it up and see how we did. So we did pretty dang good on the front there. You can see that really lines up. And these tops are, again, maybe a smidgen off, but a lot better than when I first put this together. And this was one that I cut a little wonky. I knew I had one that was cut a little wonky. So try and be as precise as you can when you're cutting and basting. Obviously that's going to make the sewing part quite a lot easier for you, but again, don't worry about it. If it's just a little bit off, you'll be able to ease it all in, and no one's going to even know the difference once everything is sewn together and the papers come out. So that is our middle part, and again, we're working on just half of this. So our next step is going to be setting in our polka dots. So we're still going to keep working just on this half, and we're going to go ahead and set in our polka dots. It's fairly straightforward with this. So they just get set into each dog's top here. And I think on my other one, so obviously there's also a polka dot that goes here ultimately once we get the 2 halves joined together. But I actually did stitch that into my other half, so you can see the polka dot comes down, and that is going to be, once I stitch these together, that's where that's going to go. So I just have to stitch in these 4 on this half. So we're going to go ahead and do that. Really simple. I'm probably going to do this off camera just to be able to sit and relax while I stitch, but just remember, be really careful when you're doing this. Make sure you're checking it, flip it, pin it, and then make sure you're stitching on the wrong side, because it's easy to, because these sides are all the same length, it's easy to accidentally put it like this, and then when you go to flip it, you're going to realize that that was not set in correctly. So double check, triple check every single time you stitch an edge. I'm going to start at one corner, stitch down, stitch up, and try to keep my thread going as long as you can. As you know, I try not to cut my threads if I don't have to, but we always knot at the end of the line so that if I do have to unstitch here, this is knotted and will not come out if I have to unstitch. So just make sure you're doing that. So pretty easy, straightforward. So I'm going to go ahead and set these all in, and then we'll show you the next steps. All right, so we have our polka dots all sewn in, ready to go. So one thing I did notice as I was putting this together is that I actually put 2 of my dogs on the wrong spot. So the last 2 that I put on, because I was trying to show you guys how to line this bottom part up, I didn't really pay attention to what order my dogs should be going in, because in the rosette, ultimately, each dog is supposed to be across from its pair. So you can see these are across, these are across. But I put these two backwards so they end up not being across from each other. So I just wanted to point that out to show that obviously mistakes happen to anybody, and I am not going to unpick it. I already have this set in. These are already perfectly placed, so it's kind of a pain to place it in, as you saw earlier in the video anyways. So we're just going to live with it that way. I don't think it's super obvious in the overall design, so it will be fine. But I just wanted to point that out to make sure if you're doing these in big halves like I did, do better than me and use your half that you finished to line up the half that you're working on. So with that being said, the next step that we're going to be working on will be insetting our stars here. So again, we added four on four sides, leaving one side wide open. And so similar to placing the dogs, I want to make sure when I place these that I am placing them in such a way that they continue the pattern that is on the other half, so that my open side is going this direction and I don't accidentally stitch it on with the open side going that way, which is ultimately going to, mean I'm gonna have to take one of these off and move it. So I don't want to do that. So just lay everything out really nice. I always say that anyways. Obviously I didn't do that myself on this, but that's okay. So rather than making more work for yourself, make sure you lay everything out really nice on your design board and just make sure that you're putting everything in going the right direction. So the next step will be in setting these stars and making sure they're going the right way. So this is going to go this way. So what we're going to do is actually stitch these two sides together first. So these are the two sides that are going to get stitched together, and then I will inset my next one. And basically the way that I stitched this was I'll stitch this and then up these two, and then the next round will be stitching these two, and if I can, up these two. So if you can see that, let me pull that back into the camera. So this is going to be my first one. So I'll stitch here, and then I'll stitch up like this, and then I'll stitch here, and I'll stitch up like this. So as long as I make sure that my first one is going the right direction, that matches with the rest of my whole entire rosette, the rest will fall into place, because you're going to always put your open end against the one that has it in there. So you only have to make sure the first one is correct, and then naturally the rest will fall into place. And I will use dark fabric to stitch this. I like to use dark when there's a dark. And again, we'll just go ahead and stitch it all. So I'll do that off camera just to make my life a little easier and show you the results. So the next step will be to have all of these sewn into place on this half here, and then we'll show you the next step. Okay, so we have this half mostly done now. So these stars are all attached. So the next step is going to be our last piece that goes on top here with the lockets. And I did do my lockets a little bit different than the block of the month suggested. I liked having a locket on each side, so you're really only showing one locket in this piece rather than two. And I do show how I do that in the video where I base this block. So if you want to check that out, you can. So I did leave one not stitched just so I can show you how I line it up to stitch it. So we have the two pieces of that, and you're going to line them up well. And again, on the sides, you want to line up your edges so that you can see that the colors, the chain lines up, the pink in the middle heart lines up really well. And pay attention to more so to what you're lining up than the edges. This one I did a pretty good job, so the edges also line up really well. But if for some reason they didn't, again, you can just ease them in really easily. So we'll go ahead and stitch across this. We'll do that in fast motion for you, and then show you how we're actually going to stitch them on to the half. Okay, so we are all set. Let's see how we did. Oh yeah, that lines up real well. You can see even that little bit of pink that overlaps is perfectly straight, so looks really good. So we have 3 of these left and then 2 edges. So I decided on my middle pieces that are just single to not put lockets at all, so the lockets are just in the double pieces. So again, we are doing these in halves. I think it's a little easier to put them together that way. But as I showed a little bit earlier, you really want to pay attention to what you did on the other half so that everything lines up the way it's supposed to. If you are doing the block of the month with Pinkdoor, they have given you a cutting assistant that will help you immensely with this. If you're not doing the block of the month, you can use the pattern itself to figure this out as well. So when I did this half, the first half, I put the doubles and the singles all the way around because there's at least half of this particular block that does have a block on every single side. So that's what I did just to make my life easier on that one. On the second half is where the blocks don't go all the way around. So that's what we want to figure out, is exactly where they're going to go. So let's see if I can do this. So I know you can't see the whole thing at once, but let me try to move this up so we can hopefully at least see the edges a little bit more in the camera for you. So again, we have a single here, a single here. So now we want to figure out, so it does end on a single, and which way it goes around, it doesn't matter. We just want to make sure. So we end on a single on this side, right? Okay, sorry, there was a correction in the block of the month, so if you are doing it, the picture shows the single ending on this side over here. You can see that. So it would be this one single, but it actually should be this side single. So you want your left side to end on a single, and then your right side is going to end on a double. So what we're going to do then is I'm only going to put pieces over here on the right side, because that should end me, because I have more doubles than singles, that should end me in a double. And again, I always suggest that you place them before you start stitching so that you know that you're doing it right. But this should work out because the left side I'm going to leave as a single, and if we have the right number of pieces, then that should work out. So we have the double there, single here, double here, single down here, and then our last one will be a double all the way at the bottom here. Let me zoom out a little bit more on the edge of my table here, but so that is going to be how we're going to stitch those on. So this single is going to get attached here, this double is going to get attached here. So if I just start with this one here and then follow the pattern around this side, that will get the right amount open, because this is where another block is going to nest in eventually here. So hopefully that makes sense. So we'll go ahead and get these ones stitched on. That'll finish this half for us. And then we'll stitch the 2 halves together and show you how we close up all the different seams that are open here as well. And like I said, I like to do the 2 halves. It is a little bit more work in the middle once you stitch them together, but I find that working on just half, especially of this big huge block, is a lot less bulky than trying to attach these to the entire block. So that's just my personal preference. If you would prefer to just build it out from the middle, you can certainly put your star together first and then just build it in layers and rings around the middle. So, but I like the 2 halves method, so that's what I'm going to go with. So again, we're going to start by stitching this piece here and then continuing along the way here, and I will go ahead and do that off camera just so I can watch some TV, and then we'll come back and show you what it looks like. Alright, so I am all done this second piece. So we have all of our pieces on. Some are blank, obviously, like we had discussed. It does not go all the way around for those pieces. So our next step will be to now conjoin these 2 edges. And the first thing you want to focus on is the middle. So I want to conjoin the middle together because that's going to be the most difficult to line up. But because we have finished the entirety of both pieces, it's actually pretty easy because they're even on both sides. We don't have a lot of weight one way or the other. So I think this works out really good. So all we're going to do is we are going to flip this over now, and we're going to take a look at just this one side of the diamond. So you have two diamonds that you're trying to line up, one here, one here. And we're going to just focus on this side first, get that nice and stitched in, and then focus on this side. So if you do it in stages, it works out a lot better when you're doing this. And then once we have these two all stitched up, then we'll worry about the outside edges where everything needs to be stitched together. So as I have said before in the previous segments, we want to line up the edges here so that our image on the edges line up really good. So you can see right here, this black line is where our secondary design is going to be, and I want to make sure that black line, those black lines line up really good. So I'm going to get them nice and lined up, and then I'm going to clip this, and I'm actually going to clip it twice to really make sure it doesn't move. So remember, we're not worrying about how it lines up on the end over here or on the other side or anything like that. We just want those designs lined up nice and good right now. And then if we're off a little bit on our corners, which this one it looks like we are, all we need to do is, as I showed before, a little bit of a curve, and that'll put that corner right in the right spot. So I'm going to go ahead and, oops, I dropped a clip. So normally, even though I dropped one, I would clip here, and then I put all my magnets down so that this was all in place, and then start stitching from this corner all the way to here where I clipped that design in place. And I would double stitch here so it's nice and secure, and then I can take these clips off and keep going to the middle, and I'm going to stop in the middle so that I can then align this other side and keep going from there. And then once that is all done, then we'll worry about doing these outside edges. So I will go ahead and retrieve my clip this, and get started on the sewing, and we'll do that in fast motion so you can see how that works. Alright, so this is all stitched through. I'm not going to open it up yet until we stitch the other one, just so it kind of all stays in place. So again, what we want to do is make sure we are lining up this design, because this is the most important thing we want lined up so we get a good overall picture in the end. So I'm going to clamp that down, and then we'll just ease in everything after that. We'll put our magnets on. And what I normally do with these big centers, obviously there's a lot of stuff coming to the middle here. So on this side I have knotted at the end of this diamond rather than keeping going. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little either one hash or an X if I can, but at least one hash to kind of cinch in that middle. So I'll go from the back side, from this diamond on the back side to this diamond on the front side with a hash of thread, and do that twice so it pulls nice and tight. And then I will start on my actual diamond and go all the way to the end. And that'll hopefully cinch that in nicely so that you get a nice middle in there. So I'll go ahead and do that, and then we'll open it up and show you the results. Okay, so we have both diamonds stitched now. So I'll take these magnets off and open it up to show you what it looks like. And that came out very nice. So with these 10-point stars, you are going to get quite a bulk on the back, but if you've basted your diamonds all going the same way, you will get a swirl. And as this sits over time, again, this isn't going to be in a completed quilt for 18 months. This is just going to reduce. I know it seems puffy right now and like it's going to be annoying, but as it sits, it's really going to get more and more compressed, and you really won't even notice it eventually. So just make sure they're all swirling the right way and it'll come out great. But you can see right here, these two were the two I just did, and they line up really nice, so that came out really good. So again, just focusing on those lines as you stitch will really get you the best results there. So the next thing we got to do is stitch all of these pieces in on each side. And since all of these pretty much touch a dark, except for maybe this, I'm going to use my dark thread, because that's what I've used on all the others, to do this whole section. And all you're really going to do is just fold stuff back. You're going to clip this here, magnet, and go there, and then once that's finished, you just turn it to go to the next one. So it's going to take a little wiggling back and forth and everything, but it should be fairly easy to do because you have the same amount of bulk on each side. Even though you're moving it around a lot back and forth, it's really not going to be overly bulky once you're actually stitching. So it should be fairly straightforward. I'm going to start from the center out just so that makes it nice and even, hopefully. And we'll go to this side, and then we'll do this side, and then the entire center will be done. So I will go ahead and do that stitching. I'm going to do that off camera so I can do it while watching TV, and then we'll come back and show you the final results. And I'll show you what papers you can take out of this too, because you do want to take your papers out as you go to make your life a little bit easier in the end, because it's going to be a lot of work if you try to take the papers out all at once. So we'll show you that real quick and the finished results. Okay, so I am all done stitching. And honestly, I can't even tell exactly where my stitching started and ended. The only way that I can really tell is because I know I had this corner as one of the ones, so something like this. It was a little fiddly for these outside edges. The middle was perfectly fine. I think that worked out really well, doing the two halves and having the same weight on both sides when putting them together. It was a little fiddly to flip these certain ways. So I'm thinking probably the only thing I would do different is maybe take out some extra papers before I do that. So for instance, I could have taken out these papers, a few of these, and that would have made it less bulk on both sides, but it really wasn't that bad. Don't be afraid to fold your papers. So if you're trying to sew, say this seam right here, just fold all your papers. You can see all of mine have been folded. I am trying to reuse these papers because I only bought half as much papers as I need for the whole quilt. So as I take papers out, I'm saving them so that hopefully I don't have to buy that second half, but we'll see how that works out, because of course there'll be some edges that I won't get. So I don't know if it'll work completely, but hopefully it will. But yeah, I think this worked out really well, and I think this is actually a really good method of doing this, is to build on each half and then put the halves together. I think it worked a lot easier than trying to attach smaller pieces and go out that way. So that's my opinion, and I think that's how I'm going to do it. So the last step for this month, so month one of an 18-month project, is going to be, if I can, for each month, I'm going to attach the blocks together. Again, this is going to be a huge project. This is a 100-inch by 80-inch quilt when all is said and done. And if I were to just save these 3 blocks and then try to attach everything at the end, in all honesty, it would probably feel so daunting that it would take me forever to do. That is one thing I regret not doing on Queen of Diamonds, was being more diligent about EPPing my borders on, because now I have all my diamonds complete. I was very good about that, but I only have about half my borders on, and quite honestly, I don't have a lot of inspiration to finish it, because that is the boring part, and I don't want that to happen with this quilt. So my plan is to attach the blocks as I go, so that this does not become the boring part and never actually happens ultimately. So if you are doing the block of the month with Pink Door, they sent you a cutting guide that includes a picture of where these blocks end up in the quilt, and you can use that to make sure that you are attaching them correctly. So just orient your block. This block is oriented the right way for me, and then figure out where these other blocks fit in. So it looks like one is up here, and then there is a dip down, and then the other one goes over here. So that's how it looks like it attaches. And that should be, so we'll make sure we're counting. Oh, nope, so yeah, so I should have 2 dip downs, yep. 2 dip downs here, and then 1, 2, 3 here, 1, 2, 3. So yes, that's correct. So this is where they're gonna go. So I'm just gonna flip this over and again do that. But before I attach those, I am going to take some papers out like I had discussed. I probably would have taken some out of the halves before I even attach those. So the rule of thumb when you're taking papers out is you want papers that are completely surrounded. What that means is even if this piece right here looks like it's surrounded, right? Because you got 1, 2, 3, the 4 sides of the diamonds surrounded, but this valley is not surrounded. So when I go to set something in here, it's going to make it a little harder and a little more, less precise on this point if I take this paper out. So this is not considered completely surrounded, but something like this where it has 1, 2, 3, 4, and both its points touched or covered, I mean, that one is considered completely surrounded. So I glue based, so all I have to do is just peel back my edges a little bit, just peel them back just enough to get that paper out. Shouldn't be that hard. And go ahead and pop that out. And like I said, I'm trying to save these papers because I'm hoping I don't have to buy the second half. We'll see how that works, because I know some of my edges have to stay in, but hopefully it'll work out. We'll see. And that one is done. And so I'm just going to go through the entire quilt, or this block, before I sew on those other 2 blocks. I think it'll make it a little bit easier to sew on those other 2 blocks if I don't have so many papers to contend with, because it does make it a little softer overall. So I'm just going to go through this whole thing and take those out. And that is another big project that you do not want to save till the end, no matter what you do. Even if you decide not to attach your blocks ahead of time, taking these papers out is quite a project, and it is not one you want to do at the end. And you also kind of give yourself the chance to accidentally leave a paper in if you save it to the end, because obviously there is a lot of papers, and that's the last thing you want to do. I have watched quite a few YouTube videos myself, and it has definitely happened to people that leave the papers until the end. And again, it's another mundane task that is super boring, so leaving it till the end might not encourage you to actually finish this quilt. So this is a fun task to do while you're just sitting on the couch. It's brainless. Put on a nice TV show and take these papers out, and it's easy enough. And if you accidentally take out a paper, or if it's loose or whatever, so if I accidentally took out this paper, which I have definitely done before, it is super easy. So this paper I took out, let's just say I didn't have to take, or shouldn't have taken that one out yet. I can put a little dab of glue down and actually just tuck this paper right back in. Easy enough. These papers are pretty malleable, and they are reusable, even though you're kind of folding them and torturing them and whatever you're doing to them. So it should sit right back in that same, I guess. It works good. It just takes a little work, but it's worth it because, like I said, that fabric needs to be nice and tight on those corners. Sorry. So there you go. So once you have it in, so I have it back in place, I would just glue these edges right back down where they were previously glued. So that way, if this was a corner that needed more firmness, that paper would be back in. So that's easy enough. If you accidentally take out the wrong one, to, you know, it takes a little fiddling, but it definitely can go back in. So no worries about that. So I am going to go ahead and take my papers out of this whole thing, and then I'm going to sew on my 2 stars, which will be the last step in this process. I think I'm going to end the video here just because it's kind of a long video, and that's pretty much the end of this month. I am actually right on target. Oddly enough, I will be getting my shipment for month 2 today. So this is perfect timing. Hopefully I can finish all of this today and be right on track to start on month 2. So make sure you're looking out for those videos. If you haven't already, just subscribe to my channel, as I don't post these videos super regularly, but hopefully they are helpful to you as you're doing this process, or even if you're just doing another EPP project. These are great videos, hopefully, on how to do certain tasks and things within EPP. And I hope that you really like them. If you did like the video, also like below so YouTube knows that this is good content. And we will see you in the next video. Thank you, everybody. Bye.